Hey everyone, it's ACPL here, and in the last video we talked about the visual design of Melee. Go check it out if you haven't already. But in today's video, we're going to be covering the visual design of Magic. We're going to be talking about how it feels in terms of its thematics, identity, and progression of it aesthetically. I actually had to rewrite and record this a few times just to make sure, all my thoughts make sense. So without a further ado, let's talk about Magic's visual design. What are the defining traits that separates tank versus power magic armor? Now with Magic, it's really easy to see, and I think it's super interesting with what Jagex has done. So for tank armor, the defining trait is that they are specifically nature-based. And if you want to go further than that, they are fungus-based. But to be all-inclusive, let's just say they are nature-based. Now when you look at the equipment Magic has, there are of course, regular cloth robes, but more so there's quite a lot of nature-based tank armor. For example, you have Fungal, Mycelium, Split Bark, Griffolic, Third Age Prayer Set, Active Primeval, and of course everyone's favorite Crypt Bloom armor. So it's quite a handful of nature-based tank armor. Now as for power armor, it's a little bit muddier, but you can still see it. In my opinion, the defining characteristic of Magic power armor is two things. One is that it is connected to lore, or two, it involves magical stones. Now for that first characteristic, connected to lore, what do I mean by that? If you look at these armors, such as the Dagonhai robes, the Lunar equipment, robes of subjugation, Virtus robes, and Zuriel's equipment, these armors all have lore tied to them in some way and fashion. The Dagonhai, for example, was an entire organization that we had to deal with in the Chaos Tunnels and some other quests. The Lunar equipment is ceremonial equipment from the Moon Clan, which we wore to enter the Dream World. Then there's, the Robes of Subjugation, which has an extensive lore tying it with Zamorak personally. Then you got Virtus. He was a powerful Zerosian mage who served under Nex and trained Fumus, Umbra, Kror, and Glacies. So there's this significance to all of these armors within the lore of RuneScape. Now as for that second characteristic, magical stones, this is more only tied to the tectonic armor. However, I would argue that it is a defining characteristic for all Magic power armor. And I'll go more in depth about the stones later on in this video, but the idea here is that for tank armor you're using the energy from the nature around you, while as for the stones you're tapping deep within the earth and using those energies. Again, we'll revisit that idea, but for now let's talk about equipment progression. Equipment progression. The equipment progression for Magic is a bit unique. What I will say is that characteristics of being tied to lore becomes a lot more present. When you get higher and higher, you do start to see equipment tied to lore becoming a lot more frequent. For example, let's look at the weapons. In the beginning, you're using just, regular magical weapons like an air staff. It's nothing special. You get that while you're learning Magic, and it's probably easily accessible to the rest of, anyone who's learning Magic. But when you get higher and higher, you start encountering things like a Rim Staff, Rage of Hugi, Inquisitor's Staff, Staff of Suske, and finally the Fractured Staff of Armadyl. These are big ticket items that are tied to a specific person or group or, some kind of lore. For example, the Staff of Armadyl is probably the second most lore significant item next to the Stone of Jazz that we've personally encountered. It was held by Armadyl, Zamorak, Karapak, and Lucian, and now us. We own it, or at least a copy of it. So in my perspective, the progression of Magic equipment is like removing the training wheels or stepping out into the real world after school. You had the learning equipment and now you're here in the real world using big name equipment. You were a student and a learner, but now you're doing your own thing, making a name for yourself. That's how I see the progression of Magic. Themes of Magic. Now the themes of Magic really tie into those two things I've been mentioning, which is its connection to lore and nature. I feel like there's an emphasis on finding yourself as a mage. Take for example Ariane. She was part of an institution, but then she went on her own quest to find herself and uncover secrets which more or less led to her recognition. She became her own person essentially. I think another good example of this is Kairos. He was an apprentice but ended up finding his niche in enchantments and illusions, and now he's widely known for that. So that connection to lore and being your own person is definitely one theme of Magic. The second theme of Magic is most definitely nature, You know, we have spells based on the elements and we have equipment based on nature. Like, it's right there. Now, if you want to go even further, magic is somewhat directly tied to nature itself. In the Heart of Stone quest, the veteran adventurer Xenia tries to stop the Elder Gods from hatching by draining Gilinor's Anima Mundi. Doing so would also remove all magic from Gilinor. So there is that direct connection. You know, nature and the energy of the world is a very important component to the theme of magic. Now I want to pivot a little bit and compare RuneScape's magic versus traditional magic because I think it's very interesting. When you think of a traditional wizard, you're probably thinking of an old guy with a long flowy beard, long flowy robes, and a pointy hat. You know, he's using a wooden staff, a wand, and an old book. The appearance is frail and you often see the wizard more so in the backline far away from the action. They're powerful and the actions that they do is meticulously thought out and careful. However, I feel that Jagex has taken like a completely different approach to magic. In RuneScape, I think that magic is very much in the action. It's very much in your face and offensive. Like with Animate Dead and Crypt Bloom, you're taking all the hits, while as in traditional settings, the meleeer would be the one tanking. So I think what Jagex has done with that aspect of being a battle mage versus, you know, wizard in robes is very interesting and unique to RuneScape. It's different, and it's the same thing that goes along with melee and necromancy even, in how they're different from the traditional interpretations of their style. Suggestions. Now as for suggestions go, I've got no clue for weapons. Like, there really isn't any lore significant dual wields that I can think of, and if you look at other high-end wands such as Prazel and Seismic, they aren't really tied to lore, more so nature, so I'm assuming some kind of elemental nature dual wields would fit the bill. However, let's talk about the armor instead, specifically the tier 95 power armor, since we already have tank armor with Crypt Bloom. Likewise, there really isn't any lore significant armors that scream tier 95 to me at least. The only thing I could think of are the Inquisitors from Terragard, and we encountered them in the Once Upon a Time in Gilinor quest series. They were noted to be fairly powerful given that they combine both magic and science together, techno magic if you will. However, other than that, we really don't know much about them. Again, it's definitely a possibility. Techno magic from the original human homeworld sounds cool, but I think we need to know a little bit more about them and have them tie into the current storyline. And unfortunately, it seems that we're very far off from ever visiting or interacting with Terragard. That is why I think the tier 95 magic power armor needs to continue in that magical stone route. Magical stones are a pretty important part of RuneScape. You know, runes, they're magic stones. You've got crystals, Saren, Zeros, and the Madra, they're all using crystals. So in that thought, what if the tier 95 power armor utilize crystals from, I don't know, the Shadow Realm or Erebus even? There's the black stones, which are more necromancy related, but there's also, you know, just like regular crystals that are native to Erebus. We know that the energy from Erebus is very powerful, more powerful than the energy from our own universe. So I think stones and crystals from Erebus or the Shadow Realm would be a step up from the stuff that we have now. Now, I had to actually rewrite this video a couple times, and I ended up thinking about another idea I wanted to share, which was light-based equipment. So going back to that nature aspect of magic equipment, it's not just flora and fauna, right? It also extends to the elements. For example, fire, earth, water, and air. But there's also blood, shadow, ice, and smoke. We know that shadow is an integral element within the RuneScape universe. You know, you got the Shadow Realm and Erebus, for example. But one thing RuneScape really hasn't explored is like light as an element. I'm going to make a future video which relates to this, you know, talking about light. But in essence, light is historically an important element in fantasy in general. You know, it's the darkness versus the light, good versus evil. In RuneScape, it really only feels like there's only that darkness aspect. So in this case, I think it makes sense and would be interesting for Jagex to explore this theme of light. You know, it's elemental, it opposes the inherent darkness of the world, you know, stuff like that. So this was just me talking about the visual design of Magic. Let me know your thoughts, what you liked, what you didn't like, or if you have any ideas of your own that you want to share. I really appreciate the comments and sentiment you guys left on my other videos. It really motivates me to make more unique content like this for RuneScape. So if you like this, feel free to drop a like, subscribe, and check out my other videos. And if you want to see any of my RuneScape art, then check out my socials linked in the description. Also, this was just like a little, series covering the visual design for combat styles. But is there like any other type of, things that are RuneScape and art related that you guys would like to see? For example, speed drawings with some commentary or talking with other RuneScape artists. Let me know. I've got my own ideas, but I'm really interested in hearing what you guys think. Anyways, my name is ACPL and I'll be catching you guys in the next video. See ya.